My wife cheated on me with her boss, stole $250, $0 from our joint account to pay for their secret condo, and now she's claiming I owe her half the house and a $100, $0 divorce settlement. Can I ever trust her again? Hello, everyone. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Now, let's begin the video. Using a throwaway for obvious reasons with certain specifics modified to preserve anonymity. I never thought I'd be sitting here writing this out, but here we are. My wife, who I thought was the love of my life, turned out to be something else entirely. The craziest part, it all started with something so small I almost missed it, little things that didn't add up. And then, one day, I stumbled across the truth that shook me to my core. Honestly, I still can't believe I didn't see it coming sooner. We'd been together for 8 years, married for 5. I always thought we had a solid relationship, you know. We had our ups and downs, but I trusted her completely. She was the kind of woman who could charm a room full of strangers and make everyone feel like they mattered. She was pretty, confident, and she seemed to have her life together. I worked hard to build a life we could enjoy, and was pretty good at pretending everything was perfect. But I started noticing little things, her phone buzzing constantly when she thought I wasn't looking, late nights at her office that turned into weekends away, and her suddenly being super defensive whenever I asked about her whereabouts. I remember one night I caught her deleting something on her phone, quickly slipping it into her purse when I walked into the bedroom. I didn't think much of it at the time, just assumed she was dealing with work stuff or some friend's drama. Little did I know that was the first clue that something was seriously off. Then there was the money. We had a joint account, nothing fancy, just enough to pay bills and save for a house. But I noticed that over the last few months, her spending habits changed. She was shopping more, dropping big amounts on designer clothes and jewelry, stuff I didn't even know she liked. I thought maybe she was just indulging herself after a stressful year, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she was hiding something. Still, I didn't want to jump to conclusions. I loved her too much. One day, I decided to check our bank statements. I figured it was just routine since I was planning a surprise trip for us. As I scrolled through the transactions, I saw a strange pattern, multiple withdrawals and transfers to an account I'd never seen before. It was small at first, then suddenly there was a huge withdrawal, 250. I stared at that number for a long time. My stomach sank. How could she steal that much money? I knew she worked her ass off, but that much? It was impossible to ignore. That's when I started digging deeper. I pulled up her phone records, her emails, and even her social media. It was like peeling back layers of a fake persona she'd been hiding. I found conversations with her boss, Mark, that were way more intimate than any work relationship should be. Flirty messages, late-night calls, plans to meet up outside of work. And the worst part, she was lying about everything, telling me she was at yoga or her sister house when she was really with him. I was furious, confused, and hurt all at once. How could she do this? How could she betray me like that after everything? I confronted her that night, and she didn't even try to deny it at first. Just looked me straight in the eyes and lied, saying I was overreacting, that it was just a fling, that Mark was like a brother to her. But I knew better. I saw the texts, the receipts, the evidence. And I knew that this affair wasn't just a one-time thing. It had been going on for months. When I finally told her I knew everything, she exploded. Said I was paranoid possessive, that I was ruining her life. She called me insecure, said I was a terrible husband for snooping. But I wasn't just snooping. I was trying to understand how she could do something so cruel. And then she threw in the money, claiming I owed her half the house, that she deserved a divorce settlement of $100, $0, because she worked so hard to keep this marriage afloat. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The woman I loved, the woman I thought loved me, was now trying to turn everything upside down. That night, I felt like I was in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. The betrayal ran so deep that I started questioning everything. Our past, our future, whether I could ever trust her again. But what hurt most was the fact that she didn't even seem sorry. Just defensive, manipulative, trying to justify her actions. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach and I didn't know how to breathe, let alone figure out what to do next. All I knew was that my world had been shattered and I was left standing in the rubble, trying to piece together what was real and what was just a lie. After that night, everything changed. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. My mind kept replaying her words, her lies, the way she looked when she told me she was innocent. But I knew better. I had the evidence and I knew she'd been lying from the start. Still, confronting her was one thing, figuring out what to do next was another entirely. I felt a mix of anger, betrayal, and a deep sense of loss, like I'd been robbed of the woman. I thought I knew. The first thing I did was dig into our finances more thoroughly. I needed to understand exactly how much money she had taken, where it went, and what she was planning to do with it. The $250, $0 was just the start. I found out she'd paid for a secret condo, somewhere she had been hiding from me, apparently with Mark's help. I saw the transfer receipts, the payments made to a luxury real estate agent, and the deed registered under her name. It was like I was discovering a whole different life she'd been living behind my back. I also learned that she had opened a separate bank account, one I never knew about, and transferred a good chunk of that stolen money there. I couldn't believe she'd been so calculating, so cold. She planned this entire thing for months, it seemed. The betrayal was worse than I thought. She, stolen from us, lied about her whereabouts, and now she was trying to claim I owed her half the house and a big divorce settlement. That woman had no shame. I decided I needed to talk to someone who knew about these things, my lawyer. I scheduled an appointment, knowing I'd need legal advice on how to handle the mess she created. I also started gathering all the evidence, screenshots, bank statements, emails, texts. I wasn't going to let her bully me into giving her what she wanted without a fight. I wanted her to see that I knew every dirty detail, that I wasn't going to be played for a fool. In the meantime, she kept up her act, acting like she was innocent, that I was overreacting, that I was just jealous. She'd throw tantrums, call me insecure, accuse me of not trusting her, but I wasn't about to let her manipulate me anymore. I knew the truth, and I was determined to get to the bottom of it. I couldn't believe I'd been so blind, so naive. How could she do this? How could she lie about everything, even the money, even the affair? The more I uncovered, the more I realized how deep her deception ran. She was willing to destroy our life together for a secret affair, for a new condo with her boss, Mark. It was like she didn't care about the marriage, about what we built together. All she cared about was her own selfish needs. And the worst part, she was trying to turn the tables on me, claiming I owed her money, that I was responsible for her betrayal. That's when I knew I had to take a stand. So I started planning my next move carefully. I wasn't just going to confront her again. I was going to make sure she understood I had all the leverage. I contacted a private investigator to verify her whereabouts, to see if she was still sneaking around or if she'd moved on to someone else. I also reached out to a lawyer to start the legal process for a divorce, to protect what was left of our assets and ensure I wasn't left holding the bag for her lies. The emotional toll was huge. I felt like I was losing my mind, caught between heartbreak and rage. How could she do this? How could she lie so blatantly, steal so much money, and then turn around and act like everything was normal? I was furious. At her, at myself for trusting her so blindly, at the whole situation. I kept asking myself if I could ever trust her again, if I could look her in the eye and believe she was telling the truth. The answer was no. I knew I'd never be able to see her the same way, but I also knew I had to stay calm to keep my head clear. Revenge wasn't about petty payback, it was about justice. I wanted her to feel the weight of what she'd done, and I wanted to make sure she paid for her lies and her betrayal. I started planning how I'd expose her, how I'd fight to keep what was mine, and how I'd walk away from this mess with some semblance of dignity intact. The hardest part was realizing I'd lost the woman I loved, the woman I thought I knew. But I also knew that staying silent or trying to fix things without action would only make me weaker. I had to be smart, patient, and relentless. I was done being the naive husband. Now I was about to become the man who fought back, who took control of the wreckage she left behind. And I was going to make sure she paid for every lie, every stolen dollar, and every broken promise. The days that followed were a blur. of planning, anger, and a strange sense of clarity. I couldn't sleep much, not without thinking about her, about the house, about the money she'd stolen. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her lying to me, smiling that fake smile, pretending everything was fine when she was secretly planning her escape with Mark. It was like I was living in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. But I knew one thing: I wasn't going down without a fight. I met with my lawyer first thing the next morning. His name was David, a sharp guy with a no-nonsense attitude, and I told him everything. About Safair, the stolen money, the secret condo, her demands for half the house, and a divorce settlement. I laid out all the evidence I had: screenshots, bank statements, the deed to the condo, everything. His eyes narrowed as he looked through the files, and I could tell he was already formulating a plan. "First thing we need to do," David said, "is freeze any accounts linked to her. We don't want her transferring any more money out or hiding assets." I nodded, feeling a flicker of relief that I had someone on my side who knew the legal system inside out. He also advised me to gather more evidence: witness statements, any proof of her affair, anything that could prove she was trying to hide or manipulate assets. Meanwhile, I hired the private investigator I'd talked to. His name was Mike, and he was a guy who knew how to dig up dirt when needed. I gave him her phone number, her work schedule, and details about her secret condo. Within a few days, he confirmed what I suspected. She was still sneaking around, meeting Mark and hiding her tracks. He even caught her entering that condo one night with her clothes and bags. Seeing that footage made my blood boil. She'd lied to my face, pretended to be innocent, and kept playing her game. I also started to confront the reality that I might lose the house, our home. Was claiming I owed her half, and she insisted she deserved a hefty divorce settlement. She'd even hired her own lawyer, claiming she was entitled to everything because she'd worked so hard to keep the marriage afloat. I couldn't believe she'd sink so low, trying to squeeze more out of me. After all she'd done, I knew I had to fight back, not just for the money but for the principle. I wasn't going to let her walk away with everything she wanted, especially not after betraying me so badly. One night, I sat down and went through every document I had, trying to piece together her entire scheme. That's when I found something even more shocking: a series of encrypted emails between her and Mark. They discussed more than just their affair. They talked about how to split the assets, how to hide some of the money, and how to make it look like I was the bad guy. It was like a blueprint for their betrayal. I printed out everything, knowing I'd need it in court. The emotional toll was intense. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and furious. I kept asking myself how I'd let it get this far, how I missed all the signs. I remembered the nights I'd come home late from work, the little fights we'd had over money, her sudden coldness. I kept blaming myself for not seeing it sooner, but deep down, I knew she'd been hiding this from me for a long time. Despite everything, I kept my focus. I knew I had to stay calm, to be strategic. I couldn't let her manipulate me or turn me into the villain. I started to prepare for the inevitable legal battle. I wanted her to understand that I wasn't going to be played. I was going to fight for what was rightfully mine, for the house, and for the truth. I wanted her to see that I wasn't just some husband who'd been duped. I was a man who was going to stand his ground. The hardest part was facing the reality that my marriage was over. The woman I loved, the woman I thought I knew, was gone, replaced by someone who was selfish, manipulative, and willing to destroy everything for her own gain. I knew I couldn't change her, but I could control how I responded. I decided I'd fight for my dignity, my money, and my future. I was done being a victim. From now on, I was going to be the one in control. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew I wouldn't let her win without a fight. Would you like me to continue with the next part? The legal process moved faster than I expected, probably because I was determined to get justice quickly. I filed for divorce, citing her infidelity, financial misconduct, and breach of trust. I also filed a restraining order to prevent her from transferring any more assets or hiding evidence. It was a messy, draining process, but I knew I had to stay firm. I couldn't let her manipulate the system or turn the tables in her favor. In the meantime, was doing everything she could to spin her story. She told her friends that I was controlling and jealous, that she was the victim of my insecurities. She claimed she was just trying to make a new life for herself, that I was holding her back. That was rich coming from her, considering she'd been sneaking around with her boss and stealing from us. Her lies were so blatant it almost made me laugh, but mostly, it just made me angrier. She also tried to guilt me into backing down, saying she was entitled to half the house because she'd worked so hard on it. She said I owed her a divorce settlement of $100, $0 because she deserved it after everything she'd sacrificed. Of course, she conveniently forgot to mention the affair, the stolen money, or the condo. She just kept spinning her web of lies, trying to paint herself as the injured party. I had to be smart about this. I gathered all the evidence I had, screenshots of her texts, bank statements, emails, the deed to the condo, everything. I brought it all to my lawyer, David, who was already preparing a case. We were going to prove her dishonesty, her financial misconduct, and her attempts to hide assets. I wanted the court to see her for what she really was, a manipulative, selfish woman who'd betrayed everything we built together. One of the most shocking revelations came from the private investigator. His footage showed her entering that condo with Mark multiple times, sometimes late at night. I saw her in her pajamas, carrying bags of clothes, clearly hiding her secret life. It was like watching a crime unfold in front of me. That footage became the cornerstone of my case, proof that she'd been living a double life and lying about her whereabouts. Emotionally, I was hanging on by a thread. Every day felt like a roller coaster, fury, sadness, confusion, and a strange sense of relief that I was finally taking control. I started to realize that I wasn't just fighting for the house or the money, I was fighting to reclaim my dignity. I've been so blind, so trusting, but now I saw her for what she was, a liar, a thief, and a cheater. Despite all this, I kept my focus. I refused to be swayed by her manipulative tactics or her false tears. I knew she was trying to make me feel guilty, to make me doubt myself. But I had the evidence and I had my lawyer. I'd come too far to back down now. I was going to expose her, get what was rightfully mine, and move on with my life. The hardest part was accepting that our marriage was irreparably damaged. I loved her once, but now I saw her for what she really was, someone who'd sacrificed everything for her own selfish desires. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and angry, but I also felt a strange sense of clarity. I couldn't undo what had happened, but I could control how I responded. I decided I would fight this to the bitter end, not just for the money or the house, but for my own sanity and future. As I sat in my lawyer's office looking at the mountain of evidence I had collected, I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let her walk away with everything. She tried to destroy me, to take what wasn't hers, but I was going to make damn sure she paid for her lies. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about standing up for myself, about reclaiming my life from the wreckage she left behind. And I was prepared to do whatever it took to win. Would you like me to continue with the next part? The court date finally arrived after months of back and forth, depositions, and endless legal battles. I felt a mix of relief and dread. Relief that I was finally going to confront all of this in front of a judge, and dread because I knew wouldn't go down without a fight. She showed up with her new lawyer, looking smug and confident, trying to act like she was the victim. But I had all the evidence on my side, and I was ready to lay it out. The courtroom was tense. I sat there, watching her as she tried to maintain her composure, but I could see the cracks in her facade. She was sweating, fidgeting, and trying to spin her lies. When it was my turn, I presented everything: screenshots, bank statements, the deed to the condo, the emails, the footage from the investigator. I explained how she had stolen from us, how she'd been lying about her whereabouts, and how she tried to manipulate the situation to her advantage. Her lawyer tried to argue that I was controlling, jealous, and that she deserved a fair share of the house because she had contributed to our marriage. But I shot that down quickly. I pointed out her dishonesty, her financial misconduct, and her betrayal. I made it clear that her actions had irreparably damaged our marriage, and that she had no right to claim half of what we built together. The judge listened carefully and asked questions. I could see her trying to come up with excuses, saying she was justified because I was abusive or controlling. But I knew none of that was true. I was just a man who trusted his wife, only to be betrayed in the worst way possible. I explained how her affair with Mark was not just an emotional betrayal but also a financial one, and how her attempts to claim money and property after stealing from us were unjustified. In the end, the judge ruled in my favor. He ordered to return the stolen money, pay restitution, and limited her claims to the house. He also dismissed her demand for the $100, $0 divorce settlement, citing her deceit and breach of trust as grounds for denying her the majority share. It was a huge win for me, but it didn't erase the pain or the years of betrayal. Still, I felt a sense of closure that I hadn't had before. After the court session was furious. She stormed out, calling me names and vowing to fight her claims in appeals. But I knew I had done what I could and that I'd protected what was mine. I felt exhausted but also relieved, like I'd finally taken control of my life again. I also knew I needed to move on, to rebuild from this wreckage, and to leave her behind. The aftermath was complicated. I sold the condo she'd bought with the stolen money, and I moved into a new place, one I could finally call my own. I cut ties with her completely, blocking her number and social media. I started therapy to deal with the emotional scars, and I focused on rebuilding my life. The trust was gone, and I knew I'd never forget what she did, but I also realized that I deserved happiness and honesty. Looking back, I learned a lot. I learned that betrayal can come from the person you trust the most. I learned that money can be a weapon, but also a tool for justice if you're willing to fight for it. I learned that revenge isn't about getting even. It's about making sure the truth comes out and that justice is served. And most of all, I learned that I am stronger than I thought, capable of surviving even the deepest wounds. Would you like me to continue with the final part? In the end, I realized that all the anger and pain I felt didn't just come from her betrayal, but from the sense of losing the person I once thought she was. The woman I married was gone long before I found out about Mark. The condo and the money. She had been living a double life and I was just a pawn in her game. It's a brutal truth to accept, but it's also liberating. Because once you see things clearly, you can start to rebuild, stronger, wiser, and more cautious. Living through this has changed me. I no longer trust blindly, but I've learned to pay attention to the little signs, the subtle shifts in behavior, the evasiveness, the money patterns. I've become more aware of what's really important: honesty, respect, and loyalty. And I've also learned that sometimes you have to fight for what's right, even if it costs you everything. That's what I did. I fought for my dignity, my assets, and my future. I don't regret standing up for myself. Sure, it's painful to realize that the person you loved and trusted was capable of such deception. But I also see it as a lesson. Trust is fragile and it must be earned every day. It's not enough to believe in someone's words, their actions have to match. If I'd paid more attention, maybe I could have seen the warning signs earlier. But hindsight is always 20/20. Now I focus on my recovery. I'm rebuilding my life from scratch and it feels good to be in control again. I've started dating casually and I'm slowly learning to trust again on my own terms. I know I'll never forget what happened, but I also know I won't let it define me. I'm stronger now, and I won't let anyone manipulate or betray me like that again. To anyone out there going through something similar, trust your instincts. Don't ignore the red flags, no matter how much you love someone. And if you find yourself betrayed, remember that you have the power to fight back, to stand up for yourself, and to reclaim your life. It's not easy and the scars may stay, but you will survive. And in the end, you'll come out the other side wiser and more resilient. This experience has taught me that betrayal cuts deep, but it also reveals who you really are, someone capable of overcoming the worst and coming out stronger. I'm grateful for the lessons, even if they came at a painful cost. Because now I know what I deserve, and I refuse to settle for anything less. Life will go on and I will find happiness again, without lies, without betrayal, and that's the best revenge of all.